that are like, bought something. Oh, yeah, a few actually.
Okay. Welcome. People are coming in.
Yeah, when I did, I'm not in
Come on in. All right. So welcome to this class with Emma Nelson, the fabulous Miss Emma Nelson, who is the owner and what would you call your title for Owl Hollow Press? Owner, CEO, queen of Owl Hollow Press.
All of those are great.
We're so happy to have her with us today, so you can pick her amazing brain on all things publishing, books, etc. And she's going to teach us something fabulous today. So get ready to take some notes. Emma Nelson, her class on messy mapping. Emma Nelson has taught writing classes at BYU, where she received a master's degree in literature, is the founder of Owl Hollow Press, and has edited many books, including the annual TABC anthologies. Her fiction is published under the name Emma Boone, with the most recent being The Shadow Behind, a series about morticians, witches, and traveling through time. That sounds amazing. All right, Emma, take us into something fabulous.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And thank you. Oh, host disabled attendee screen sharing. So Joe, I can't share my screen. Joe disappeared. Oh, I am the host now, so let's see. Okay, now I can share my screen. Awesome. Okay, that will make it easier to talk if you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. So sorry, 1 second. Okay, here we go. Can everyone see that? Awesome. Okay, I realized today that this is kind of a confusing title when you can see the whole blurb about messy mapping. We are not talking about drawing maps today. So if that was your goal, I am very sorry. Today we're talking about messy mapping in the context of the world's biggest question for writers. Should you be a plotter or a pantser? And we're going to answer that burning question today, 100%. Just kidding, we're not. You're all going to have your opinions on it, but we're going to try to talk about some things with that. So the reason that I feel strongly about messy mapping, as illustrated by our good friend Buddy the Elf, is because it's so easy to fall in love, right? We all have these storybook ideas. We have these characters we want to write. We have these plots that are amazing, and we fall in love with them. We're so excited. But then what happens after we actually start writing, and it gets hard, and it's frustrating, and it doesn't go as smoothly, or what we think in our head doesn't come down on paper as quickly as we think it should. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to kind of meet in the middle with those two, the falling in love and getting a book written. So we'll spend some time on some things at the end and do some questions at the end. So if you have questions as we go, just put them in the Q&A. But I'm going to go through things first and then go back, because it's kind of hard to jump back and forth between the screen sharing, as you have seen. So anyway, let's get started. This is one of my favorite quotes. Tim Ferriss is a productivity expert, and he talks about how the superheroes you have in your mind are nearly all walking flaws who've maximized one or two strengths. And I love this because it's the idea that you can be a normal person, you can be somebody who's not great at everything, but as long as you're good at one or two things, you can be very successful. And I like to think of this in the context of the Brandon Sandersons or the J.K. Rowlings of the world, or the Stephen Kings. J.K. Rowling, her strength was Harry Potter, right? She went all in on Harry Potter. She worked on that until it sold. And Stephen King, he wrote a bunch of different books. He threw out a bunch of different ideas, and some stuck and some didn't. And so his strength was putting out a lot of stories and then seeing what worked. So two totally different strengths, but they both are two of the most successful authors in the world today, right? So just having one strength, one or two strengths that you really fine tune will make all of the difference in your writing career. So what does that have to do with plotting versus pantsing? I think all of us have a lot of opinions on this. And last night on the teen anthology launch, a lot of you said you were pantsers. And so I want to maybe try to talk about that a little bit, because I think there is creativity and power and excitement in pantsing a story when you're not sure what's going to happen next. But I think to answer this question, we should look at two hugely successful writers and see what they do. Okay, so the first is, a lot of you know Brandon Sanderson, you've read his books, you've learned from him. He's amazing, one of the best writers I've ever met, just genuinely smart about how he writes stories. He said, I've met lots of people who by sheer number of pages written should have completed several novels. However, many of them have dozens of stories where they've gotten a few chapters into a book only to get frustrated, uninterested, or simply find themselves uncertain what to write next. Raise of hand, who's been in that situation? Do we have, I don't know if we even have, oh, good. So a lot of us, right? We have this story and then we get a few chapters in and we're like, I don't know what to do with this, or it gets too overwhelming or frustrating. So he is a big proponent of plotting and planning your story so that that doesn't happen. And pantsers, Stephen King says, of course the writer can impose control. It's just a really crappy idea. Writing controlled fiction is called plotting. Buckling your seatbelt and letting the story take over, however, that's called storytelling. Storytelling is as natural as breathing. Plotting is the literary version of artificial respiration. So that's very, very strong words from Stephen King. He does not like plotting. He likes just going where the story takes him. So how do you keep, and how many of you feel like that by raise of hands? I think a lot of us do, right? Yeah. Lucky, Jamie Lee, Caleb. So a lot of us, we like the thrill of just finding out where the story takes us. But I would like to argue, a lot of us have heard, get your first draft down. It doesn't matter how crappy it is. And that's so true. But I love this quote by Lisa Crone, and she writes a great book about plotting. And she said, there's a massive difference between the, oh, whoops, I forgot to block out that one. So sorry. The crappy first draft of an actual story and a crappy first draft that randomly romps all over the place. Oh, there were lots of swears I didn't catch in this one. I apologize. But the point is, there's a difference between a story that goes everywhere and you're not sure if it's going to work, and one that has a little bit of structure to it, and then you follow the fun parts of the story. So today we're going to talk about what I call messy mapping, which is somewhere in the middle. It's where we can keep the power of the fun and the storytelling and the going where the characters take us, but still have a little bit of structure so that we don't burn out like Brandon Sanderson talks about. And so my idea of messy mapping contains 4 things. And my argument is, if you know these 4 things, you can write any book. You have enough information to get going and to see it through to the end. So know your premise, the promise of a good story. So this is what hooks us. This is what we fall in love with. How many of us have heard a book title that, or a tagline that we just fall in love with? This is what makes us want to read the story. Know your conflict. What gives your story energy? Any of you have listened to Jennifer Jenkins' suspense class, or a lot of people talk about how without the cliffhangers or the conflict, there's no story. There's nothing that exciting about reading the day in the life of somebody where nothing bad happens, right? You want that conflict. Know your guideposts. And this is what gives the story structure. And this is what people talk about in general when they're talking about outlining. And we're not going to go into hardcore outlining. We're not going to be Brandon Sanderson's, but we are going to have a little bit of a guidepost. And I'll tell you a cool story I read about that, which relates to these barrels that you see. And then the fourth one is know your characters. I think we all agree that characters are what give your story heart and soul. They're what we connect with, right? We fall in love with the characters. So we want to be hooked. We want to stay on board, and we want to know where we're going, and we want to fall in love with great characters. So if you have those 4 things, you are ready to write a book. And so we're going to dive into those a little bit. Premise is the simplest combination of character and plot and typically consists of some event that starts the action. This is the best description of premise that I found. I love how it just talks about it in these very simple terms: character, plot, what starts the event. And most of the time when we're writing a story, that's what we already know, right? That's what we're connected with from the very first time we have the idea. So it shouldn't be that hard to pull that together, so it gives us an idea of where we're going with the story. So I want to show a few premises you might recognize. I'm going to ask you, let's see if I can see the chat. I want to see if you guys remember these or if you recognize them. Okay, I think I can see the chat. There are 3.7 trillion fish. Oh, shoot, I just gave that one away. Fish in the ocean. They're looking for one. Okay, did anyone recognize that one? Finding Nemo. Okay, good. A lot of you. Jamie Lee got it. Elizabeth, Peter, probably people above that that I didn't see. Good. Okay, this one's a tiny bit harder. So yeah, Finding Nemo. This one. A 17-year-old aristocrat falls in love with with a kind but poor artist aboard the luxurious, ill-fated Titanic. Titanic! Yay! Lucky, Andrew, McKay, Allie, good job. So you know it right from the premise, right? You know exactly what we're talking about. Aslan said that was hard. Yeah, I know. The Titanic title in it gives it away a little bit, but okay, here's another one. In a post-apocalyptic world, a family is forced to live in silence while hiding from monsters with ultra-sensitive hearing. A Quiet Place. Parker got that one right away. Charlie, The Quiet Place. Good. Excellent. Yes, A Quiet Place. So right from that hook, what's so cool about that? I don't know about you, but I have brothers and sisters, and I think it would be very hard to live in a world where you're all quiet. It's almost impossible, right? So that that's one that just pulls you in right from the hook. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Hunger Games because I think this premise is really fascinating. I think most of us have read this book. And sorry, I need to figure out how to hide the chat after I open it. Okay, so most of us have read The Hunger Games, but I didn't know where the premise came from. Suzanne Collins said the idea for The Hunger Games came to her one night while she was channel surfing. And on one channel, she saw people competing for some prize in a games show, and then she saw footage of the Iraq War. She said the two combined in an unsettling way and sparked the first ideas for the series. And adding to that, she drew on inspiration from the Greek myth of Athens sacrificing their own children, the Roman gladiator games, and the contemporary reality TV show. So together, these were the seeds of an idea, and she brought them together in really cool ways as we've seen the end results. And I think that's the fun of the premise. We all have these great ideas, but figuring out how they're going to come together to make an interesting plot, that's the challenge, right? So your premise is the idea that got you excited about the story in the first place. And later, when your masterpiece is written, it's what will entice readers to pick it up. This is when you see somebody and it's love at first sight, or they say something funny and you want to get to know them better. This is what draws you to stories. So how do you get ideas? Let's talk about that a little bit. Always be curious, always be writing things down, and inhale stories in all of their forms. I'm a huge advocate of, I have a master's degree in literature, so I've studied the classics. I know how important they are, but also I'm a huge fan of watching TV shows and watching movies and playing video games and experimenting with different types of stories, because people play with stories in different ways, and they're all feeding you ideas, visuals and characters, and in all of their forms, they're fun and interesting. History, there's so many different types of stories to pull from. So inhale all of that. But I also have a specific formula that I think is really fun, and it kind of blew my mind when I figured this out, but I didn't make it up. But hear me out. Anyway, okay, let's talk about Mary Shelley to talk about this specific formula. How many of you have read Frankenstein? By raise of hand. Peter, Ben, okay, good, lot of you. Lucky, Emma, Jamie Lee. It's fun to see how many anthology people are here. Hello, people. So glad you're here. So a lot of you have read Frankenstein and know what an amazing book it is. And even if you haven't read it, you've seen it in pop culture. Frankenstein is everywhere. So what I really cool about this is if you get to know a little bit about the author, Mary Shelley, it makes a lot of sense. So one of the things that's interesting about Mary Shelley is her mom died a few days after she was born. So she got an infection, and we all know that bearing children back in the 1800s was not always a great experience. She didn't make it and she died. So all of Mary Shelley's life, she was kind of fixated on her mom. Her mom was an author too, so she read her works. She idolized her mother, and she actually spent a lot of time at her mom's grave, just laying on the grave and writing and talking to her mom. So she had this fixation with death her entire life. And then after she got married, she had several miscarriages, and she had a child, a baby that died. I think it was around 6 months old. So her whole life was this kind of grief and loss and sadness and fixation with death. And you can see that in Frankenstein if you've read it. But we've all read different stories about grief and loss and death, right? But how does that translate to Frankenstein? So that's another cool part. During her life is when science was really taking off, when people were starting to explore the human anatomy and electricity. We know stories about Tesla and all of the experimentation that was going on with power. So you take those together, and they had these cool like traveling science fair. Basically, it was like a science fair presentation, but they would go on the road and travel. So she went to one, and it was about reanimation, and they were experimenting with injecting power into human bodies to see if they could reanimate people. And what does that make somebody who's fixated with death already think about? Right? You can see how those two came together. So she had these ideas for years. These were interests and obsessions that she had for years. But it wasn't until this third thing came into play that Frankenstein was born. That's something we a lot of times overlook. And that is, she was in, I think she was with her husband, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron, and a lot of books, and basically a weekend during a party, they decided that they were going to create a ghost story. They were all different types of writers, and they wanted everyone to create a ghost story. So that finally brought these ideas together for Mary Shelley, is she had this structure. Before, she had these feelings and fixations with death, and she had this reanimation. But the ghost story is what finally helped her bring those together. And I wouldn't say Frankenstein's a ghost story, but she was trying to work within those parameters. We know those, right? It was a dark and stormy night, and we have the tension and the fear. And so those are the three things she brought together to create Frankenstein. So when I think about stories, I would even say, if you have an idea, but you're not quite sure what to do with it, take a piece of paper and write down the things you're emotional about or passionate about. Maybe for you, it's not grief and loss, but it's insecurity or bullying or fear of whatever. And then something you're curious about, and put those in 2 columns, and then add a column of what you're excited about, what genres you love, what tropes you would love to play with. And when you play with those in different ways, draw lines, move things around, make odd connections, you'll be amazed at how the ideas come together and things that you never even imagined that you would think of. I think the structure where she did a ghost story is so important, because when we give ourselves limits, it actually helps our creativity. Because if we're forcing ourselves to stay within confines, then we have to figure out how that works. And I think that's part of what's so great about Brandon Sanderson's world building, is he has limitations on his magic, right? He says this magic can only work in this way, and those limitations are what make it interesting and give conflict to the character and make the world really come to life. So the parameters could be anything from the length of the story, the tropes, like tropes in science fiction are aliens or starships or In fantasy, it can be swords or dragons or whatever. So those things specific to the genre. And then the expectations within those genres. For example, the fairy tale starts with once upon a time and people expect a happy ending most of the time. So giving people what they expect forces you to kind of think through your cool idea and how to deliver it in a way the audience will love. And again, what kind of stories do you love reading and what do you want to create? And all of those will help you bring the ideas to life. So we've talked a little bit about how to come up with ideas and the premise. And now I want to talk about conflict. So we've all had stories that we're like, okay, just one more chapter. I can't go to sleep till I just read one more chapter because it ends on such a cliffhanger. Or when our characters are in trouble, we get mad that we kill off characters, but it's when they're in trouble that we really want to read what happens next. It's when we're really engaged, right? And Robert McKee's book called Story, it talks a lot about writing, and he says story works by posing questions and opening situations. So by having these, what if this happened? What if this happened? And opening new situations, that's what creates a good story. I like the example of reality TV when you talk about conflict. They're a perfect example. In the Bachelor, for example, a group of women want the same thing. They want the dude to fall in love with them, right? They all have different motivations, but they all have this goal of making him fall in love with him. And that's where the cool conflict comes in, right? There's conflict every time one of them isn't chosen for a date, every time he kisses one girl and not the other, every time he eliminates women in the final ceremony. There's constant internal and external conflict with all of the participants. And that's what creates the drama. And we love drama, and that's why we keep reading or watching. In Survivor, I love that even the official slogan says, outwit, outplay at last. So there's a ton of conflict right there in that tagline. And then if you can look at these little tags on each of the characters, it says shocking moments, cast secrets, epic villains, stunning twists. Those are the things that great conflict are made of, right? We love the shocking moments. We love those epic villains. We love watching for the twists. Those are what creates great conflict. All the contestants in Survivor come in wanting to win the money. But I think it's fascinating because as they become more hungry and more desperate and more tired, and their true character comes out, right? We see who's really mean. We see who's fun. We see who's kind. We see who's willing to do anything to get ahead. And so there's a reason that both of these series have been on for more than a decade. They're formulaic. They're the same thing every time, but they give us a ton of conflict with characters, and that's what we love. Thinking of ways to introduce conflict into your story will not only keep your readers engaged in your story, but it will also keep you engaged in your story. It will help you write it when you think about, oh, I can't wait to write the scene where this person does something horrible, or I can't wait to write this fight scene. Those are the scenes we love to write and we love to read. So good conflict comes from giving your character a goal. And you've probably talked about this in many classes, but your characters have to want something. If there's no goal, there's no conflict ever. And you can do that by killing a friend or throwing someone off a cliff, doing something that hurts them, which is really sad. But if you look at, say, Frodo in Lord of the Rings, we love him and we keep rooting for him because bad things keep happening. And he has this internal conflict about being taken over by the ring versus wanting to do the right thing. And those come in conflict all the time with each other. So with him, we just see him try really, really hard, and then he fails, and then he tries again, and then he fails. And that's interesting because that creates constant conflict, right? For some of you have learned in high school, but you can always go Google it. Google narrative conflicts in fiction. These are the man versus nature, man versus society, and you'll find a lot of cool ways that you can create conflict, because when somebody wants something and somebody else is in their way, that's what creates conflict. So when you look at the best characters, we talked about Katniss and Frodo quite a bit, but they all have the inherent conflict, right? Harry was born not knowing who he was, but he has all these people that already hate him or already out to get him because of who he is. We've got Buffy, who didn't ask to be a vampire slayer, but there's all this conflict inherent in the town that she lives in. and her having to fight those battles. So all of the great characters that you love, you can see the conflict in their lives, and that's what keeps you rooting for them. Okay, we're going to move on to this one. Know your guideposts. And I think this is the one pantsers struggle with. Let me tell you, I have written probably 10 novels at this point, and I started out as a pantser. And I asked my writing group, I've been with the same writing group for, I don't know, like 8 years now. We met in Brandon Sanderson's class at BYU, and they're just great writers. And I asked them, are you plotters or pantsers? And both of them said, I used to be a pantser, but the longer I've been writing, the more I've started to become a plotter, because it helps to know where you're going. And especially if you write series or anything that's longer than a short story, knowing where you're going will save you so much time and energy on the back end. But I want to share this story that I love. There's a book called Eat That Frog. It's about productivity, but he tells the story of crossing the Sahara Desert. He said the desert was 500 miles across without water, food, gas, or even a fly. There was nothing in sight. It was like a broad yellow sand parking lot that stretched forever in all directions. More than 1,300 people had died crossing that stretch of desert because drifting sands would obliterate tracks and travelers would become disoriented. So to help with the lack of features, the French government brought in black 50-gallon oil drums and placed one every 5 kilometers, exactly the distance to the horizon on the curvature of the earth. So because of this, you could see 2 oil barrels at any time, the one in front of you and the one that you had just passed. And because of that, they were able to cross the world's biggest desert, 1 oil drum at a time. So just having that visual in front of you. And writing a book is the same. It can be really daunting. It can be frustrating. It can be like a giant desert. But when you know what comes next, all you have to do is take one piece at a time. And that's my huge plug for just having general idea. And I'll show you some of the ways that I do that. But just having a general idea of what comes next. You don't have to be an intricate outliner and have pages and pages of notes, but if you have a general idea of what comes next, it'll save you a lot of energy, and it will keep it fun because you get to have something to look forward to. You don't feel lost in the middle. You don't feel lost in this desert. So when we look at guideposts, in general, a story, we can all agree, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, or as R.L. Stein says, a beginning, a middle, and a twist. But basically, we have these expectations that we're going to be introduced to the struggle, then we have the struggle, and then there's some kind of resolution, right? But going a little deeper into that, even if you have nothing else, have a general sense of this. But going a little deeper into that, there's all kinds of different options. There's the 3-act structure, the 5-act structure, and you can Google any of these and find tons of information. There's a high-level outline, which is the main plot points. This is more what I do, is just kind of a paragraph about what's going to happen in each scene. The hero's journey is a great one. For those of you who don't know, Google that. But it's a whole, Star Wars is based on the hero's journey. It's a whole idea of a reluctant hero being called to action and going on a journey and being changed. And there's all kinds of types of characters built into that. Save the Cat, there's a book for screenwriting and one by Jessica Brody about novels, and it has 15 specific beats that are in every single book. And I know a lot of people swear by this method because you can see those beats in movies. Like, you can see what successful books and stories and movies do because you can track those points. You can make them all different, but you have a specific goal with those. And one of my favorite is Dan Harmon's Story Circle. And Dan Harmon is the writer of Community and Rick and Morty. So you may not love his stuff, but I think this is a genius method because it's fun to have a circular idea, because I feel like that's what a plot is you look at a beginning that comes full circle. But this is cool because like, I just take a paper plate and draw out lines, and then I fill this in. And he does one for each character of each episode of each season. So he has this high level view of everything that's going to happen, which seems intense, right? But it's such an easy structure that that it's fun to play with. I really enjoy playing with this one. So that's the one I recommend, but they're all great and they all will work differently for different people depending on your personality and what you like and what you enjoy as far as knowing where you're going. The next one is know your characters. And I think this is the one we all love the most, is we get excited about great characters. I love this quote. I tend to believe that writers are cartographers, and we are mapping human experience. So if you don't know what cartographer is, it's somebody who makes a map. So we're basically mapping human experience when we write a book. And we all have human feelings because we are human and we know humans, right? So that should make it easy. But sometimes digging into those pieces can be a little more challenging. One of my favorite books is called Building a Story Brand, and it's about marketing, but he talks about marketing as the hero's journey, which we just talked about. And he said, if 3 questions can't be answered within the first 15 to 20 minutes of a film, the story has already descended into noise and will almost certainly fail. So it applies to books, it applies to short stories. And these are the 3 things I think you have to know if you know nothing else. What does the hero want? Who or what is opposing the hero getting what she wants? And what will the hero's life look like if she does or does not get what she wants? And even if you know these 3 things about a character, you can write a good character. I think the tendency is to get really caught up in, she had long flowing red hair and green eyes and a thin waist, and all of those things don't matter to the story. I would say, unless their appearance is essential to the plot, like Harry Potter's scar, it's not the most important part of the character, and it's not where you should spend your time. So what I like to do, and again, everybody take what works for you and you know, do that. But I feel like having a driver's license or dating profile where you have a high level look at who the person is. Don't spend so much time designing your characters that you never get to the actual story, because I strongly believe most of your character will be revealed through the story. So if you think about Katniss, she could have been just some random girl in the woods hunting for deer with her bow and arrow the whole time, right? But we see her character because of what happens in the plot, right? We see how she reacts to this meeting where her sister is called to fight in the Hunger Games. So when we know a basic idea of who our character is, like from a dating profile, or I think we all have a friend that we know them well enough to write a paragraph about them, but we don't know exactly how they would react in every situation. That's when their true character comes out, because we see how they react in that situation. So I like to compare it to dating or taking a road trip, because in those situations, you're with that person and you're forced to get to know them organically. I went on a road trip once. I won't tell you who with, because they're probably here, but it was really fun because I didn't know any of them well, but one saw a woman with a baby begging by the side of the road, and she insisted on going and buying diapers and dropping off the diapers for this woman. And another one, she was eating this disgusting fish sandwich that smelled up the whole car and was completely oblivious to that. And just all these weird, and a different one had to argue with everyone about politics and religion and everything else. So their different personalities came out in the road trip. It wasn't a big info dump like she was inconsiderate of others. We experienced that as we got to know her and as we developed the story. So that's my spiel with characters. Get the basics of who they are, but don't spend more time on it than you need to. Get to know them as they go through the story. And some easy ways to find characters. There's so many. There's role-playing book games. There's basing characters off historical figures. There's horoscope books, which are fun because you can just pick a birthday and build a whole character around what they say that that person is like. Baby name books, a lot of times they have the meaning of the name, and so you can base your character off that trait. Character archetypes, there's tons of those if you Google them. You can build them around a single flaw. That's really fun because they're trying to overcome that, and you want them to be a good person, but they have this flaw that gets in the way. Pull from film characters, pull from celebrities or mythological creatures, pull from your friends, from your family. Anyone who has an interesting character trait, you can build on them and do a lot of fun things with characters. So for messy mapping, I need to hurry, but these are some of my favorite. I love like Post-it notes or 3x5 cards because you can just pull those out and move them around. Like if you have a high level idea of what things you want to have happen, like here's my little Post-it notes. I know these things need to happen, but then I can just move them around as I go. So these are some different ones. The one I want to talk about a little bit is the character or plot folder. I like to do these for each character because then you can take all the character folders and just put them in the same binder and just pull them out and keep track of information. But what I do is, this is my messy map of each character. So the front is the premise. And I just did it around this dog because why not? Dogs are cute, right? So the front is the premise. The second page is the conflict. And this is where I put my high level notes of the conflict I want to add to the story. And I just tape a little pocket on so I can store my notes in. And then the third is the guideposts. And I like to use the story circle. So I'll just map that out right here and I'll write it in pencil and I can change things around as I go. And then the back is my character. And this is my driver's license basically of information. So I know the basics and I can look at them and see them. I usually find someone on the internet that looks like my character and then I'll print it out and have that to visualize when I'm writing. But then you can make a column of their external and internal unique things. And I would only do 2 or 3 of those because you're going to build those again as the story goes. So this is my story folder for each character. And they're fun to do, they're easy, and mapping it out shouldn't take more than a week or 2. You have a great idea. It should take a couple hours if that's how much you want to put into it, but you have a great idea of where you're going and you can always go back and reference that when you get stuck. I also want to emphasize, again, I don't completely agree with the crappy first draft. Yes, you want a crappy first draft, but you also want to have some general idea. But the first draft is just you telling yourself the story. Like Lee Bardugo said, you never ever hear music or read a story that's somebody's perfect first draft, ever. You're telling yourself the story, you're getting it down, and it's after that that you will really start to fine tune things. I'm going to just kind of skip through some of these, but one of the main things about about planning ahead for your stories is giving respect and opportunity to all of your ideas. How many of you, by raise of hands, have had this brilliant idea right when you're in the middle of writing a different story? I think all of us have, right? Yeah, Jamie Lee, Parker, Sydney, Emma, a lot of us do that, right? That's how our brain makes connections, like, ooh, it'd be really cool to make this story. And then we get that shiny thing and we want to chase it instead of finishing what we're on. But if we can keep track of some things and write down ideas and store them for later, then we give the respect to the story that we're on. And then we still have those ideas later. We don't forget about them. We just save them for another day. Find a plan that works for you. We're not all going to be Brandon Sanderson world building geniuses. I know I'm not, but having some kind of plan makes writing so much more fun. You still have the loosey-goosey in the middle where you're not quite sure what's going to happen next, but you also have a general idea, and that makes it fun to pick out scenes to write that you're excited about. I like this quote: don't waste time waiting for inspiration, begin and inspiration will find you. I believe that's more true in writing than anything else, that once you get started, those neurons start firing, and that you'll find success in that. I love the idea that every draft is going to be better than the last one. So bad news is a perfect first draft doesn't exist. It's very, very rare. But the good news is editing is where the magic happens. So if you have an idea of where you're going, you can have so much fun at the back end, finessing it and smoothing things out, rather than picking apart your whole story to try and fix it because you had plot holes or things that didn't work that you would have caught if you'd planned a little ahead of time. The other thing I would say is fail early. There's a big saying in the productivity world: fail early, fail often, but always fail forward. I would say fail early and tweak often. It's so much easier when you have a plan to know what's not going to work about your story than if you're just randomly writing. And also, if you fail often, like writing short stories are a lot easier than writing a novel, right? So test your ideas on short stories, test them out in paragraphs or a messy map, And then you will be able to fail early and tweak it and succeed more the next time. How many of you know Mark Rober, my favorite YouTuber? He is so fascinating to watch and so interesting. And if you haven't watched him, go do that. That is your homework assignment. But he gave a TED Talk about how he came up with good ideas. And I think these are so applicable for writers. He says, stay curious, work hard, get lucky. We don't have all the control, so get lucky is a huge element, but we can stay curious and we can work hard, and having a plan for that makes that a lot easier. I want to end with Stephen King's quote. He said, "I've written because it fulfilled me. Maybe it paid off the mortgage on the house and got the kids through college, but those things were on the side. I did it for the buzz. I did it for the pure joy of the thing. And if you can do it for joy, you can do it forever." And I think that's the boat most of us are in, is the joy. Are we to Q&A or are we ending?
We have some time for Q&A. We have about 10 minutes.
Okay, let me wrap this up really quick and then we can do Q&A. And these are a couple of my favorite resources, especially the character ones. Try out the RPG, or like I said, a horoscope, astrology, those are everywhere. And these are just some of the resources that I love. And then these are me. You can find me. I have a podcast, or these are my books, or find us at Owl Hollow Press. Follow us because we do fun Thursday Facebook Lives. And then that's where I am online. And if you want to come back to those, this is a recording, so feel free. Anyway, questions.
All right, so if you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A. Let's start with Emma Charles. She asks, any recommendations on how to format general world building and outlining?
So I think, Emma, it's different for everyone, and you're going to have to find what works for you. What I do is start with what I know. I think it can be challenging to try to look at the whole big picture, but start with what you know. For example, if you watch Lee Bardugo's panel today, they all talked about basing their world off of different cultures. Hers was the Russian culture. There was a West African culture. They're based off different cultures. So you can pick the parts of those that you love and then put those into an outline, and then just start fleshing that out as you go. Just have those little posts, and then you can build from there as you get ideas as you go.
Okay, Aislinn says, can you go back to the one slide? I want to take a screenshot. You can just go back to the context slide for her. Parker Fillmore says, how do you keep your story interesting in between guideposts?
Oh, that's a really good question. And we touched very briefly on the idea that if you're bored, your readers are going to be bored too. So if there's scenes you are excited about, write those scenes. And then you're left with transitioning instead of just writing like chapters and chapters of in their head or parts that are boring. And that's one of the reasons I like the idea of guideposts is, for example, I really like to write the action scenes or the romance scenes. The other scenes aren't as fun for me. And so I'll plug those in at the end. And when I do it that way, then it stays interesting because those are the areas where I spend my time, is on the parts that I find interesting. So I don't know if that works for everyone, but just always be thinking of, what do you love as a reader, and what has to happen in the story. I think one of the tendencies with newer writers is to just put everything in there, like this would be cool, this would be cool, this would be cool. So you have to have an idea of what your story is really trying to do, and then just focus on the high points of that story. And I think that you'll find it's not as hard to stay interesting if you have some ideas ahead of time where you're going.
Okay, McKay asks, how do you get past a slow part of the story without rewriting earlier chapters?
Okay, that's a good question, McKay. One of the things I'm a huge fan of, when I taught writing classes, I would make my kids do things like, they were in college, they're not kids, but whatever, I call everyone kids, but just like we call it ninja drafting, where they put what am I thinking of? Eye cover on so they couldn't see their keyboard, and they would just have to type for 10 minutes, or anything. There's a lot of different exercises, but anything that forces you to just keep moving ahead instead of going back and correcting yourself. And I think when you keep moving ahead instead of second guessing what you're writing, you'll naturally move to the parts that are are more exciting and less slow. And if you do have to rewrite parts of it, just make notes to yourself in the margin, or how I do a couple asterisks, and then I search and find all of those at the end, so I know where I have to come back to. And if those are parts that I have to rewrite, then I'll come back to that and just keep writing ahead instead of going back and fixing things as you go. And I think once you get the momentum of your story, it's a lot easier to do that. And just don't correct yourself, I guess is the point. Just keep going.
Okay, so Andrew asks, writer's block, help.
Okay, this, Andrew, I'm glad you asked. I feel like this is one of the main arguments for having a plan. I think writer's block comes when you don't know where you're going. So I would say two things. One, have a plan, because again, you can pick out the fun parts to write and focus on those, but also take a step back. I think when you, I don't know about everybody, but when I'm just drafting a story that I don't know where it's going, and I step away from it, then I don't know where I am. I have to reread and reorient myself to get started again. But if I have a plan, then I can take a break and go for a walk. And I guarantee every time I do something physical, like go for a walk or kayak or just take a bike ride, whatever I'm doing that, sorry, I'm getting distracted. That whatever I'm doing, I take a step back, do something physical, and that's when your mind starts to spin. Stephen King has this great quote called about the boys in the basement. He talks about these creepy guys that live in the basement and they're always working even when you're not. And those are your subconscious. They're working through ideas even when you're taking a step back. So for writer's block, I would say take a step back, do something physical, and your mind will work in different ways, and your story will be percolating.
Oh, sorry. I think we have like a partial question that was redacted, but it said something about the average number of pages in a novel.
Oh, it's different for every genre. That's another reason you want to know your genre, and a way you can actually have some help structuring your story, because every type of genre has different page lengths. So for a YA fantasy, I would say it has between 70 to 100,000 words. So I don't know how many pages that translates to, but when you're writing, you're thinking in terms of words, and there's about 250 words a page, and each one will have a different requirement. So look up, there's a lot of blog posts that have talked about it, and it's really interesting to see the different requirements of different genres.
How much world building do you want to do before starting?
That is a good question. And that's totally up to you. And that's what I was trying to say. Like there's the Brandon Sanderson, who he plans out every minute little detail. And then you got the Stephen King, who just goes all in and just writes weird stuff. And some of Stephen King's, I would argue, could have used some better editing and world building, because he has a really cool story, and then it's like he doesn't know how to end it. So it just depends on how much world building you want to do. But I would say have a general sense of, I like world building where I have a general sense of what kind of culture I'm doing. So I'll have some basic questions and then kind of build in the world as I go. I find that more fun. And you'll be really, they talked about research earlier on the panel, but you'll be really excited by how many connections there are between different cultures and different parts of history. And it's fun to make those connections come together, but I like to see them come together as I write instead of wasting a lot of time. It's not always wasting, but a lot of times it's easier to research than to write. And so I like to world build as I go instead of doing a lot of it up front.
Okay, and final question, and this is actually from me for the aspiring teens that are watching, aspiring writers. As a publisher, what kinds of things are you looking for in your submissions?
That's a great question. So there's always the answers that everybody hates because it's hard to quantify them. But when you can start off the book with a great hook, there's a difference between like just doing something dramatic and then flashing back to the boring part versus starting out with a strong hook. When you have a strong character voice, when you have something that's unique, a lot of people do the wait, I woke up and it was just a dream. So kind of avoid the things that everybody else is doing and find new ways to drop readers into the action and have a great voice. I don't know if there's time for this, but I'll say really quickly, one of the things I recommend for voice is it's one of the biggest things in every book you'll read. Every book you love, you'll notice they have a great voice. So I would read books that you love and try to imitate the voice of that with your own story. And you'll just copy it until you get a sense of what makes good voice. And that will make a huge difference in your ability to produce a unique voice. It sounds counterproductive to copy somebody else's voice, but when you do that with several different authors and find what pieces of voice you like, then it will influence your own writing.
All right, that was awesome. Such amazing advice for everybody. I hope you all took a lot of notes. Thank you, Emma, so much for coming and donating even more of your time to TABC. And
Thank you guys for coming.
everybody who's waiting for their next class, it starts at 10 minutes after the hour. So get ready to jump into your next class. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.